I would love for you to be in a position where you say, hey, I'm ready to buy a house right now, and the only person that I need to check with is me, myself, and I. I would love for you to be that situation. And so we're going to talk about some tips that you can use to help you become self-sufficient so that when it is time for you to move forward in that home purchase, you've got everything you need ready to go, and you have minimal resistance in being able to get into that home or start that process of being able to buy. And so welcome to the Home Goals Podcast, the ultimate guide for turning your home goals into a reality. I'm your host, Derek Thornton. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of obtaining a home. We'll be offering expert tips, helping you avoid pitfalls, and championing your journey towards that cherished place to call home. In today's episode, this is a special one. If you didn't know it, June, which we're officially in now, believe it or not, June is the official National Homeownership Month. And that is an awesome time where we celebrate home ownership, and we also talk about ways that we can help people obtain homes. And it's a conversation that happens all around it. It's also a special month for myself as well, because June 2nd is my wife and I's house anniversary, right? That's the anniversary of when we bought our first home. So it's always a special date for me that means a lot. And I love that this month is upon us finally. And so in this week's episode, we are going to discuss 5 tips to save for a home purchase. With it being National Home Ownership Month, you'll start to hear a lot of different programs and companies and organizations talking about tips for obtaining a home. And you'll start to see even the national government. You'll start to see the president even talk about different programs and things they're doing to try to help with home ownership. And there's a lot of wonderful programs out there that have helped people get into homes and obtain homes over the years. One thing I always say, though, is that while a lot of those programs are wonderful and they do great things, because they're run through the government a lot of times, they do tend to be a little bit slower, sometimes inefficient, and they may not always be the fastest route for you to gain that property or gain that home. And so my goal is always for people to reach a place where they are self-sustaining. And so if you can avoid having to go that route, it's going to make the process a lot easier for you. It's going to open up your opportunities and things that you can do with that home purchase. And so I always try to look at it from the aspect of how can we avoid using those programs as great as they are. Let's see if we can figure out a way to make it so that you can go out and do what you want to do. You don't have to jump through all the red tape and the hoops and all these different things that these programs will make you do, and all these different criteria and rules and things that you have to follow. I would love for you to be in a position where you say, hey, I'm ready to buy a house right now, and the only person that I need to check with is me, myself, and I. I would love for you to be that situation. And so we're going to talk about some tips that you can use to help you become self-sufficient so that when it is time for you to move forward in that home purchase, you've got everything you need ready to go, and you have minimal resistance in being able to get into that home or start that process of being able to buy. And so without further ado, let's go into the 5 tips. I'm sure there are more that we could probably add. These, in my opinion, are the 5 most important just for kind of building up that sum of money that you need to get into a home. And I'll go into detail on each of them as far as explaining things that you need to keep in mind along the way. So the first one, contact a trusted realtor and ask for a lender recommendation. Typically a local lender recommendation. That's your first tip. You want to reach out to the realtor and see who are some lenders in the area who can help me figure out what I need for this purchase. Right? The saying goes, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. You want to have a firm, clear picture in your mind of exactly how much money you need to raise, right? You don't want to just go online or use a mortgage calculator and try and figure out, I think this is about how much I need, and use that as your goal, and then ultimately find out that you didn't take into account several other factors that you needed as well, right? So the lender, particularly a local lender, is going to be able to explain all all that information for you. There's an episode of the Home Goals podcast that we have called How Much Money Do I Need to Buy a Home? That episode goes further into detail into what things you need to be looking at and how you need to be setting up that goal for you to purchase. And so check out that episode if you want to learn more about that. But again, the most important thing right now is just contact a trusted realtor and a local lender so that you can get a firm idea of how much money you need to save, and you're knowing how much money as well you need to have in liquid cash up front. There's a difference between the two, right? There's money that you need to have at the closing table, but there's also money that you need to have up front. There's money that you need for inspections, appraisals. There's money that you often need. If you live in North Carolina, we have what's called a due diligence fee, and those are funds that are due up front immediately, or earnest money deposit. Like, there's a lot of funds and expenses that are due up front. And if you're using a program that is offering assistance or anything like that, they're not going to give you those funds up front to use. Those are funds that you need to have available up front, and they can reimburse you on the back end, but they're not going to give you those funds to use when you first start getting into that process. And so you need to talk with the realtor and figure out, hey, how much money on average are you seeing for a lot of the houses in the areas that I'm looking at? How much money are they requiring up front, or how much money do I need up front to be competitive in order to make this happen? And so that's the first thing you need to do when you're deciding to save, is just figuring out what in the world is my goal as far as getting that money saved up. The second tip, the second thing that you need on this list, is you need to open up a dedicated savings account. This is a savings account. There's a couple of things to keep in mind with this account. For one, you need an account that is somewhat inconvenient for you to access, right? Preferably, it's an account that is set up with a different bank from your primary banking account, right? So we all have a primary account, right? Our primary checking account. That's typically where we go when we are paying for groceries, when we're paying our bills, all those things. We often have a primary checking account that we use for all of those everyday expenses and everything like that. This savings account, you want to be as far removed as possible from that primary account. If you have a savings account where you can just go on your phone and within a matter of seconds transfer all the money over into your checking account, more times than not, experience has shown that you are more likely to have a difficult time saving up that money because it's so easy to just go in and just pull it back out. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience when I say this. I've had situations myself where had a goal. I set up a savings account where I had all my money off to the side, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna park it here, leave it there for safekeeping, and then inevitably life happened, and I immediately ran over to that savings account and switched that money back over. Now, I'm not saying that you won't still have that option if you do it with a different bank, but I would like to say, hey, let's have something in place so that there's a few obstacles that you have to go through to get to that money, right? Like if you have to wait until a weekday, or you have to actually visit a local branch to get access to that money to switch it over. If you have several obstacles in your way, more times than not, you're usually going to try to consider other options before you go and just pull that money back over, right? And so you want to try to make it as inconvenient as possible. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that you also don't want to put this in a volatile account that is based on the market. Right. You don't want to invest this in cryptocurrency. You don't want to invest it in the stock market in hopes that it'll double or triple over time while you're saving that up, whatever. You don't want to do that. You want to put this in a very safe, conservative account, typically like a money market account or something that is not going to change based on the volatility of the market. Because what you don't want to have happen is that you have all your money invested in this very risky vehicle or this very risky investment, and then the market goes down, and initially you're excited because you're thinking to yourself, oh man, like if the stock market and everything is down, that likely means that there are less buyers or home buyers that I'm going to have to compete against when I'm ready. But that also means if your money is parked in that risky account, that money has also gone down significantly as well. in that market. And now you're having to sit on the sidelines with everyone else, waiting for the market to bounce back before you can finally get into buying a home. And so I always recommend that you keep that money in a very safe, stable account. It's going to be a little bit depressing when you see how little money you have made on it. But again, this is not an investment. This is a savings account, right? You're just trying to save this money up, pile it up as high as you can, so that when you're ready to make that purchase, you can pull that money out and you don't have to worry about any penalties. You don't have to worry about any fees or expenses, right? You're not pulling the money from a 401k and having to take the tax hit on it. You're not having to worry about any of that. You are taking this from a savings account that is very safe, very secure, and you're just pulling that money over once you're ready to make that purchase. And so again, 2, open a dedicated savings account just for the purpose of saving up for that home purchase. 3, you want to automate your savings. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but there's a book that I read, a wonderful book. It's called The Automatic Millionaire by David Bach. It's definitely something I would recommend checking out whenever you get a chance. And it really just kind of goes into detail into the advantages of automating your payment structure or automating your savings. And the book goes more into detail with doing it for the purposes of eventually retiring and saving up for those type of investments. But it's also a wonderful option to use when you're considering saving up for a big purchase such as a house. Right. It's something that you can set up where if you have, assuming you have a predictable income, you can set it up to where you can automate the savings to go over into a separate account. I used to work at a credit union myself as a teller, and I saw all the time that there are people who had transfers set up with their different accounts where like you could go to your bank and say, hey, I would like to set up an automatic transfer, and it will transfer funds from your account over into a different account, right? And so it could be a different account with that bank, or if, again, going back to tip number 2, you could have it transferred over to a different bank, right? And so you could say, hey, I want this money to be transferred over or wired over to this other bank automatically on a monthly basis, right? So you can say, hey, I don't know, make up a number, let's say $300 a month or something like that. I want that to be transferred over every single month, regardless of what happens. Now, again, that could be something where you kind of like cheat the system in some cases where you're like, I don't really have a chance to, or I don't want to move those funds over. But if you automate it, that is going to increase your likelihood of actually following through with it. Because if you say, hey, to yourself, hey, I'm just going to go through the process of switching the money over every month myself, research and experience has shown that's not likely to happen, right? You're likely going to fall off the wagon at some point. We see it all the time with people who say, oh, I'm not going to do a 15-year mortgage. I'm going to do a 30-year, and I'm just going to pay extra on that 30-year every single month. More times than not, that is not going to be the way things happen, right? There's going to be something, again, life happens, right? You got the flat tires, you got the proms, you got the different family events that are going on, all these things that are happening that cause you to kind of move away from that money. And so again, if you can automate it, right, have it set up to where it's not even that option, it just automatically comes out and you don't even really have a chance to look at it or even get tempted to use it or to spend it, it's going to help you in that process, help aid you in that process. And so you want to try to, if at all possible, again, this is more so for people who have a predictable income. As myself, as an independent contractor, being a realtor, I have a very irregular income. So this is a lot more difficult for people like myself. But if you know, like, clockwork, you know exactly how much money you have coming in, this step is going to be a lot easier of a tip for you, because you can set it up and you know exactly what you got coming in every month, what's going out, and you can set it up to have it automatically transferred over. So you never even have a chance to look at it, and it just slowly builds up over time while you're working, right? You want to have that set up in place and in process. The fourth tip, this one is it's a bit labor intensive, right? It's going to require some time, but I believe that it is the most helpful tip in helping you to truly understand what is happening with your finances and where things are going. It helps you to really get a clear picture of where you are in your financial situation. And the fourth tip is to analyze all of your necessary and unnecessary expenses. Right. So you want to analyze all of them. What do I mean by analyze? Okay. So several years ago, I went to a business planning seminar, and they gave a tip that I found to be very helpful, and very simple, but it basically was go online and print out your bank statements. If you're like myself, or most people in today's society, there's a good chance that the majority of things that you spend money on, you are using a card, right? You don't likely use cash. If that is the case, this is going to be a much more accurate step for you. But if not, you might have to go a little bit more into detail. But if you're like myself and you tend to put most expenses, whether it's bills or whether it's a random restaurant purchase or something that you get at the store, if you're putting those expenses on a card, this step is going to be very effective for you. What you'll do is you'll go online, go to your checking account, your primary one that you use for a lot of your expenses, and you'll print out the most recent statements. Usually it's good if you can do the 3 most recent statements. You don't want to do 1 month because that may be an outlier, maybe a weird month that you have some different things go on. You want to get 3 months at least to kind of get a clear picture of where you stand. So you get 3 months of bank statements, print them out, lay them out on a desk in front of you, and then take a highlighter and go through every single charge on those cards. And what you want to do is you want to first go through and mark out all of the things that are unnecessary. Now, again, this is based on your personal preference or what you think is right. What I believe may be a necessary expense may not be a necessary expense for you, but you want to try your best to be honest with yourself and say, okay, did I really need, or was it really necessary for me to have that Netflix subscription? Or was it necessary for me to have that McDonald's biscuit that I had this morning, right? Was it really necessary for me to do that? You want to go through, you want to look at all of the expenses, and anytime you come across something that is unnecessary, you're going to highlight it. Right. So go through each and every single charge on that statement, highlight everything that is unnecessary. And then once you get to the end of the month, add up all those charges and see how much it equals and if you can try to get it. Now, if you want to get even more detailed, right, if you're really nerdy like I was on this, you can also break it down into different categories, right? So you can say, hey, this is how much I spent. You can put like I highlighted it and then I put a letter R next to the charge for restaurant, right? Or I highlighted and I put H for hobby or something like that, right? You could try to categorize all of these unnecessary expenses so that you can really get a clear picture of where your money is going. But ultimately, you want to see, okay, all the money that I spent that was unnecessary, how much does it equal? And how much could I realistically reduce this number, right? So like if you spend an average of, let's say, $400 a month at restaurants, you could say, hey, I'm going to just go cold turkey and just not do anything. But you know you better than anybody else, right? If you know that that is not a realistic goal, or there are some days that you just won't be able to get around it, again, figure out a way that you can reduce it or plan for it ahead of time. Because what you'll also start to realize when you go through and analyze these statements, you'll realize that you are way more predictable than you think you are, right? You'll realize like, oh man, I guess I do that every Wednesday. Or, oh, I guess I do go by that restaurant, or I do go get that cup of coffee, or I do go get that lunch, whatever. You'll start to be able to do that, and you'll be able to anticipate unnecessary spending before it ever even happens. And that is going to be your superpower, because then you're really going to get to a point where you can go through and start making changes in the way that you spend money, right? So mark all those unnecessary expenses and see if there are ways that you can reduce it. And then necessary expenses, these are things that you can't get around, right? These are things like your rent. These are things like your car insurance, your gas. Like these are things that you know, like, hey, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and spend these expenses, and see if there's a way that you can even reduce those, right? So for example, my home insurance. Now, granted, this wouldn't be, if you're saving up for a home, this wouldn't be a charge for you, but you can see if there's a way that you could save on your car insurance. I had an insurance agent look at all of my rates, and I was able to save $100 a month on my rental rates. I mean, sorry, not my rental rates, but my insurance rates every single month, right? And so if there's necessary expenses, see if there's ways that you can save on those as well, and that's going to be highly beneficial to you too. But don't just go, oh, I think I spend this much money on, or I think that. You want to have concrete evidence, and the best way to do that is to go through your checking account statements and go through line by line and figure out where exactly your money is going. And then last but not least, the fifth tip for saving for your home purchase: break it down into bite-sized pieces, right? So like I said, if you say, hey, I need to save up $15,000 for this home purchase, just saying that is going to make you get a lump in the back of your throat. You're going to feel like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. It's a lot to go through, and you're going to be thinking about all the things that could happen during that process, or could happen while you're trying to save up for it. And you may get discouraged and say, yeah, you know what, I'll just think about it another time, or, oh, I'll just try to focus on something else, or I'll go look for some other program that'll help pay this for me. You may think of any number of things. The best way to do it is to break it down into bite-sized pieces, right? And so try to figure out a way to break it down. One book that I really enjoyed that talks about kind of breaking things or condensing things down was The 12-Week Year by Brian Moran and Michael Lennington. And this talks about how a lot of us, we have all big, audacious New Year's goals that we plan on doing, and then we often fall off the wagon. And that's because we see our lack of progress, and we go, oh, man, I'm never going to get that goal. And we get so discouraged that we just fall off the wagon and forget about it altogether. If you condense your year down to 12 weeks in one quarter, then it becomes a lot more realistic, where you can say, hey, I'm not trying to save up $15,000 right now. I'm just trying to save up $3,000. I'm just trying to save up $4,000, right? Break it down into a piece and then say, hey, what can I do over the next, let's say, 12 weeks to make this goal realistic, right? How much money do I need to save each of these weeks? Are there certain tasks or a certain side job that I can pick up to kind of help boost that savings for this particular quarter? But find a way to make it so that you can break it down and then celebrate along the way, right? Like I said, you don't want to get to a point where you're just like got your head down working so long that you never look up to enjoy any of it. I would say, like, hey, once you reach that benchmark, one of the suggestions they have in the book is that you do something to reward yourself, right? And so you have some type of reward or some type of program. Maybe it could be a dinner out. It could be a new toy or some gadget or something like that you've been wanting to get. Have something that you can reward yourself with for getting to that point, and then set it up for the next block or the next goal, and then go from there, right? And so break it down into manageable chunks so that way you can have the motivation to get there. Because I'm going to tell you right now, it is way more mental than you ever realized in getting to this point, right? There's going to be a lot of times where you don't feel like it, a lot of times where you're just like, okay, this will never happen. I don't think this is ever going to work, or I'm not seeing the progress that I thought I would see. And those are going to be the times where you need to make sure that you are breaking it down and that you got your mindset in the right place. And so, again, just to recap, 5 tips for saving. 1, contact your trusted realtor for lender recommendations to get a realistic picture of what exactly you need to save. 2, open up a dedicated savings account. And remember, make it inconvenient to access that account. 3, automate your savings so that it goes out automatically. 4, analyze all of your unnecessary and necessary expenses. See if there's ways you can cut down on them. And then 5, break it down into bite-sized pieces. Again, there's far more tips and things that you can go into, but those are 5 that I found to be the best as far as just getting you in the right mindset and also setting it up in a way that sets you up for success. And so, as always, if you ever have questions about any of this, I hope that you find it helpful. We've got some other great things planned to talk about in this National Homeownership Month, so I hope that you'll join us in the following weeks. But hope that you all have a wonderful day. Enjoy this month. Have an awesome time, and I'll talk to you next time. Have a good one.